I am Eddie, a 35-year-old civil engineer who is naturally quiet and extremely loyal according to others. I have always believed that by doing the right things, loving in the right way, and staying true to oneself, life will unfold as it should. I also used to trust in the strength of my marriage. That particular morning began ordinarily, but looking back on it now, it almost feels dreamlike. I had a client meeting later in the day across town, so I took my time getting ready, rather than rushing out. By the time I made it downstairs, Lena, my wife, had already left for work. No goodbye kiss, just the sound of the front door closing and the clicking of her heels as she walked away. I paused in the kitchen, noticing the half-empty coffee pot she had left behind. It was a small thing, but it bothered me. We used to have breakfast together, but now she simply left the pot running and departed. No note, no smile, nothing. I decided to take my time and have coffee at a cafe near her workplace. She had mentioned a small cafe she liked, known for its espresso. The strong lighting accentuated her sketches, transforming them into works of art. Despite driving past the place 100 times, I had never been inside. It appeared to be a tranquil haven, perfect for those looking to slow down, something we hadn't had much opportunity to do lately. Stepping in, I was greeted first by a sense of warmth, not just from the heater humming beneath the window, but from the overall coziness of the space. The warm wood tones, the chalkboard menus, and the soft indie playlist playing in the background. It was the type of cafe where patrons lingered with their laptops for hours. I ordered a black coffee and settled into a corner near the frosted window, partially hidden behind a potted fig tree. Intending to review my presentation notes for just 20 minutes, I found myself captivated. 10 minutes in, the bell above the door chimed. I glanced up, almost instinctively, only to see Lena, my wife, entering with three of her colleagues, engaged in laughter. Her voice sounded gentle yet animated, a side of her I hadn't experienced in a while. She looked radiant, with her hair falling loosely around her shoulders. In Ed Beck red lipstick, that navy blazer that always brought out the blue in her eyes. It was the same one she wore the night I proposed. She didn't see me. They sat one table over, close enough that I could hear snippets of conversation, but not so close that it felt intentional. I was boxed in by a wall and a bookshelf filled with used paperbacks, so even if I wanted to get up and leave without catching her attention, I'd have to walk past her. And something held me in place, maybe curiosity, maybe something darker. She looked happy, not just fake it for work happy. She was glowing in a way I hadn't seen in years. Her eyes lit up, her shoulders were relaxed, she was smiling without effort. And it hit me like a punch to the gut because I couldn't remember the last time she looked like that when she was with me. I was just about to stand, thinking I'd surprise her and say a quick hello, maybe bring her a coffee refill as a sweet gesture, when I heard it. A man's voice, confident, borderline flirty, you light up. When Grayson is around, your husband must stay jealous, right? Even though the words weren't spoken loudly, I managed to catch each syllable clearly. A hiccup in my chest made my heart skip a beat. Lena's laugh, genuine and comfortable, followed immediately. Then came the words that struck me deeply, the rhythm of her voice etched in my memory. Stephen doesn't get jealous, he doesn't even notice. I'm not really his wife anymore. I found myself frozen in shock, my hand shaking with the coffee cup halfway to my mouth. My focus intensified as I became hyper-aware of my surroundings. My breath, the warmth from the mug, the tightness in my chest. The words echoed in my mind ceaselessly until they lost their meaning, becoming a relentless sound pounding in my head. What did she mean by not being his wife anymore? Was it a figurative way of expressing a disconnect, or was it literal? The man replied with something about deserving what she wants, but I was unable to hear the rest over the rushing of blood in mine. Tears welled up in my eyes, causing the world around me to blur. The voices around me faded into a muffled hum, and the faces became indistinct. I found myself unable to think clearly or move, frozen in place like a statue. All I could do was watch as she laughed, nodded, and sipped her latte, seemingly unaware of the devastation her words had caused. Time seemed to lose meaning as I sat there, feeling disconnected as if observing the scene from someone else's life. It was as though I was witnessing a moment where a wife had casually hinted at emotional detachment from her marriage to another man, all while no one else seemed to notice. Finally, I gathered the strength to stand up, my legs heavy as if made of lead. Slowly, I made my way out, avoiding looking in her direction until a brief glance revealed her smiling at the man across from her in a way she hadn't smiled at me in what felt like an eternity. Stepping out into the cold, the wind felt like a harsh slap against my face. In my distracted state, some coffee spilled onto my hand, but I barely registered the sensation. I felt it. The sidewalk buzzed with people, students, professionals, couples, strangers. But I felt like I was underwater. Every sound was distant. Every thought was sharp. I don't even remember walking back to my car. I must have driven home, but it's a blur. The only thing I remember with any clarity is that voice in my head, the one that kept repeating her words like a twisted mantra. He doesn't even notice I'm not really his wife anymore. And the worst part, she was right. After that morning in the cafe, something in me shifted. I didn't tell Lena I had seen her. I didn't bring it up that night or the next morning or the one after that. I couldn't. I wasn't ready to hear whatever explanation she might have offered, or worse, the lies she'd probably try to feed me. So instead, I did what I've always done. I waited, I watched, and I started seeing everything I had ignored before. It's funny how your brain can filter out red flags when your heart is still clinging to the image of someone who doesn't exist anymore. The instances I had dismissed as merely being part of a busy work season or her being tired suddenly resurfaced with a heightened intensity, much like the new password on her phone. We had never kept secrets like that before. I was never one to invade her privacy by checking her messages, and she was aware of that. Yet, a few weeks back when her phone illuminated on the nightstand, I unconsciously reached over to see who had messaged. And that's when I noticed it. A new lock screen featuring numbers instead of the familiar pattern we both knew. When I inquired about it later, she nonchalantly mentioned, just a precaution with all the data breaches happening. She said it with a smile as she folded laundry, but she avoided my gaze, and I chose not to push the matter at that time. Subsequently, the work calls began to pour in at increasingly later hours, 9, 10, even 11 at night. Sometimes she would be in bed beside me, scrolling through her phone or on the verge of sleep, only to abruptly spring up and announce, I have to take this call, sorry, client emergency. Hastily grabbing her phone, she would swiftly exit to the other room. In the bathroom, she closed the door gently behind her. Initially, I rationalized it as simply being part of her job. It was not uncommon for architecture firms to have long hours and clients could be demanding. However, the way she spoke into the phone with a hushed tone and a soft laugh that I could barely discern through the wall was different. It wasn't the professional demeanor she usually exhibited with clients. One evening, I found myself standing outside the bathroom door inexplicably. I stood there in silence, listening to my spouse whisper sweet words that were not meant for my ears. There was no sound of running water or the flush of a toilet, just a voice that sounded foreign to me. When she emerged 20 minutes later, her forced smile disappeared, and she avoided making eye contact with me. She quickly mentioned something about project delays before retreating to bed. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, pondering how many signs I had overlooked. The affection began to dwindle soon after, fading away gradually and imperceptibly, much like a leak in a hidden pipe. You only realize the extent of the damage once it's too late. There were no more goodbye kisses in the morning, no more reassuring hand resting on my arm. The sense around her changed too. One morning, I embraced her before she left for work, hoping to bridge the distance, only to be stopped in my tracks by the foreign cologne lingering in the air. Its musty, spicy notes were not mine. I had not worn such a fragrance in years. When I questioned her, she casually attributed it to samples from work, but her turning away spoke volumes. Consequently, peculiar groceries began appearing in our fridge. Cilantro, hummus, blood orange sparkling water, and a protein bar with a flavor that resembled dirt items I despised. Her explanation for these choices was always tied to a colleague's recommendation, a desire to try something new. Moreover, she started forgetting important details such as a dinner engagement with my sister and a weekend trip we had planned. Back in February when I mentioned it to her, she simply stared at me with a blank expression, as if I had just imagined it all. It felt as though I had become background noise in her life, perhaps even the invisible husband, the one she no longer truly saw. Maybe she discussed me in coffee shops, believing I wasn't listening. However, the breaking point for me came through a text message on a Tuesday evening. I had messaged her around 5 p.m., asking if she wanted me to pick up dinner or cook something at home. Typically, she would promptly respond with a casual thumbs up or a quick whatever's easiest, even on her busiest days. But this time her reply arrived almost an hour later, lacking any warmth or affection. It simply stated, I'll be late tonight. Tight schedule, can't break away. There was no hey babe, no smiley face, no sign off, just those four cold detached sentences. It read more like a formal memo one colleague would send to another. I gazed at that message for what felt like an eternity, then shifted my gaze to the wall, and finally to the wedding photo still hanging by the door. The photo where we were both smiling, happy, and together. She giggled, her eyes crinkling as she leaned back into my chest. The girl I once knew had vanished long ago, and I could no longer pretend otherwise. That evening, I perched at the edge of our bed as she took a shower. Glancing around our room, everything suddenly seemed foreign, like a hotel room overstayed. The photos, the lotion on the nightstand, her robe hanging behind the door. All of it felt like longings from a different life, a different spouse, and she felt like a stranger now. Suspicion had evolved into an all-consuming obsession. After that chilly, business-like text, I could no longer remain still. Every fiber of my being was on high alert, wired, intense, anticipating impending revelations. It was no longer mere doubt. It had transformed into dread, a persistent whisper in the recesses of my mind, telling me, "You already know, you just haven't seen it yet." Thus, I abandoned all pretense. I began checking her location history on our shared Google account, a feature I hadn't even realized was still sensed until I started delving into it. On Thursday night, something unusual occurred. First, there was mention of the office, then a park, followed by an unfamiliar location called Elevate Yoga Collective at 8:43 p.m. She had never spoken about attending a yoga class, and this particular place was not nearby. Nestled in a residential area of the city notorious for difficult parking and limited late-night options. Upon researching Elevate Yoga Collective, I discovered that it was described as a private, reservation-only wellness space. Later that same night, she arrived home around 10:30, sporting slightly damp hair, clad in leggings, and with a flushed complexion. She gave me a quick kiss on the cheek, explaining that they had to work through the night to complete some renderings. This left me restless and unable to sleep well. The following day, I left work early, citing a dentist appointment as an excuse. At noon, Lena messaged me, informing that she would be working late due to a last-minute deadline and advised me not to wait up. Instead of waiting at home, as I had done previously, I opted to drive across town and parked a couple of blocks away from her office to remain inconspicuous. As I sat in the car with the engine off, my fingers absently tapping against the steering wheel, a sense of unease settled over me. At 7:11 p.m., the building slowly fell into darkness as the minutes passed. People started to trickle out into the parking lot. I carefully scanned each individual but did not see Lena among them. By 7:30, Lena's car remained parked in its usual spot. As 8 o'clock approached, I grew unsure of her whereabouts, no longer convinced she was still inside. Then, at 8:17, her car finally left the lot. I discreetly followed a few car lengths behind as she drove across town, navigating through traffic with practiced ease. It became clear to me where she was headed. Although I hesitated to acknowledge it, when Lena turned onto the street leading to the yoga studio, my heart sank. She parked in the small private lot next to the building, joining only a few other vehicles. The sign above the entrance, though dimly lit, revealed its name, Elevate Yoga Collective, just as indicated on the map. Lena stepped out of her car, adjusted her ponytail, and slung a bag over her shoulder. With a bag slung over her shoulder, she made her way to the door. I waited for 5 minutes before following her. Parking my car farther down the street to avoid being noticed, I walked along the opposite side of the sidewalk. The building had large glass windows at the front, partially frosted and with sheer curtains hanging loosely behind them. By standing at the right angle, one could peer into the back room. Crossing at the corner with my heart racing, I moved towards the side of the building where I caught a glimpse of them through a gap in the curtain. Lena and another man. She was laughing, her hands resting on his chest. He was tall, possibly 6'2" or 6'3", good shape with his dark hair tied into a short bun, dressed in sportswear as if he belonged there. His hand was placed on her waist as they stood intimately close, closer than I had ever seen her with anyone other than me. Then they shared a kiss. It was slow, deliberate, not a mere peck or mistake, but a kiss that held the depth of history. And he responded to her kiss. As I watched in shock, my entire being went cold, as if my blood had suddenly ceased to flow. I couldn't tear my gaze away. She leaned. Remaining pasta? I mumbled to myself. Having already finished my meal, I wasn't particularly hungry. She gently kissed my forehead, seemingly unfazed, before heading off to clean up. Observing her graceful exit down the hallway, I realized there was no need for a confrontation at that moment. What I required was a well-thought-out plan. That night sleep eluded me, not due to anger or even sadness. It was the stark lucidity that kept me awake. a merciless, precise type of clarity one experiences only after facing the truth head on. The mental image of Lena kissing that man, likely Grayson, was etched in my memory. Yet I did not waver upon recalling it. There were no tears, no tremors, just a recalibration of my thoughts. By daybreak, a course of action had taken shape in my mind. Lena had a particular fondness for blueberry muffins. Not just any kind, the ones from Des, the bakery near our residence. She always claimed they surpassed those of any brunch spot in the city, treating them as a special indulgence before a demanding day. I had bought her those muffins countless times in the past. That morning, I rose early, drove to Dee's, and purchased one. Upon returning home, I carefully placed it on the table ready to place it on the kitchen counter, right where she'd see it the moment she walked in. Next to it, I left a simple note on a yellow post-it. Last night's yoga looked interesting. That was it. No accusations, no maim, no threat. Just truth wrapped in politeness. Then I left for work. All day, my phone stayed silent. No texts, no calls. Not from her, at least. I half expected a flood of messages, explanations, denials, maybe even silence stretched into cowardice. But Lena didn't flinch, not digitally anyway. It wasn't until I came home that I got the reaction. She was already on the couch when I walked in, arms folded, face blank. She looked up like she'd been waiting all day, her body so still it looked posed. Hey, she said, like it was a normal day. I didn't answer. I just hung my coat, kicked off my shoes, and sat down across from her. Silence, the kind that hums, that presses into your ears until you want to scream just to break it. She couldn't take it. I saw your note, she said finally, her voice calm, almost rehearsed. I nodded, still silent, she questioned. I let her accusation sink in before responding, though, just observed what was already there. I searched mine, seeking something. Anger, heartbreak, softness, anything. There was no emotion left. The question, who told you that? Elicited an unexpected laugh from me, a laugh that was sharp, bitter, and hollow. I watched you, Lena, through the glass, through that damn curtain. You weren't hiding, you didn't even try, I revealed. Her reaction was a flinch, a moment where I thought she might crumble, but she held herself together. After a deep inhalation and exhalation, she confessed, I didn't mean for it to happen. I raised an eyebrow skeptically, to which she continued, sure you did. It just got out of hand. She admitted, I was unhappy, Eddie. Been off for a long time and you know it. Unhappy. If I had $1 for every time someone used unhappiness as an excuse for infidelity, I could have retired early and avoided this conversation altogether. She said to me, you could have informed me if something was broken. I responded, I tried, she snapped back, but you were never listening. You were always lost in your thoughts. Her words hit me harder than I had anticipated because there was truth in them. At times I did get consumed by work, neglecting to notice how she was feeling. I simply went through our daily routine assuming everything was fine since she wasn't visibly upset. However, her actions were not justified, not by a long shot. I hear you now, I assured her. So please tell me the truth. She hesitated before looking me in the eye and confessing, it's not just him. This revelation made me pause, feeling like the ground had shifted beneath me. Can't be serious, I exclaimed. Are you telling me that you've been involved with multiple people? And you think that's supposed to console me? That you weren't emotionally attached? I couldn't fathom the logic behind her explanation. I'm telling you because you asked for the truth, she said it softly. I stood and made my way towards the kitchen, not because I needed something, but to gather my thoughts. I stood at a distance, gripping the sink's edge, gazing out the dark window into nothingness. The words echoed in my mind relentlessly. It's not just him, I said, turning back to Lena with my hands on the counter. How many? I asked, but she only shook her head. Don't do that, she pleaded. How many, Lena? I persisted, met with more silence. I don't know, she finally admitted. At that moment, it was as if something within me simply switched off. Not a break or a snap, but a gradual shutting down of a part of me I never knew existed. I no longer felt pain or anger. I was simply done. In a trance-like calm, I moved past her into our room, retrieved a duffel bag from the closet, and began to pack clothes and laptop chargers. Without a word, without haste, I was a picture of eerie composure amid the chaos. You're leaving, Lena observed as she sat on the couch. Not forever, I replied coolly, but for now. Where are you going? She inquired. Away from you, I stated firmly. She remained motionless, legs pulled close, face hidden in her hands. Without further explanation, I walked out. leaving her behind. I drove over to my friend Nate's place, where I crashed on his couch. Without asking questions, he handed me a beer and turned on the game. That night, as I lay on a stranger's throw pillow, a revelation struck me. I didn't feel broken, I felt liberated. That night, I made the impromptu decision to move in with Nate, the intention of staying only a week. It was a temporary escape, a pause to gather my thoughts before facing a conversation with a divorce attorney that filled me with overwhelming anger. I had no concrete plan, only a need for space. Nate understood without needing me to explain. He didn't pry for details or force me to relive the pain over drinks and sports highlights. He simply offered me his spare room, acknowledging the unspoken understanding between us. The following days passed by in a blur. I worked from Nate's house, occasionally calling in sick to avoid sympathetic stares in the office. Lana reached out a few times with messages like, "Can we talk soon?" And I know this is hard. I want to explain everything. Each time I left her message unopened. I wasn't ready for an explanation. I had been seeking distance and truth, but truth has a way of revealing itself unexpectedly. It all began with a bank alert. One late night, I logged into our shared account, primarily to understand how much longer I could sustain myself before dividing our finances. Something seemed off as I reviewed the numbers. My expenses had been minimal since my move. Nate was shouldering the grocery costs, and I had reverted to college-style meals of ramen and protein bars. However, the balance was surprisingly low, far below what I had anticipated. As I scrutinized the transaction history, I made a shocking discovery. Over $12,000 had vanished. These were not major expenditures like lavish shopping sprees or sudden trips. Instead, the money had been siphoned off in smaller increments. $180 here, $250 there, with a few withdrawals of $600 each labeled as consulting fees or design service retainers. Individually, these amounts were inconspicuous, designed to evade detection. Yet, when totaled, they amounted to $12,487.94 over the past 6 weeks. What alarmed me further was that almost every transaction was categorized as funds transferred to a personal project account or an independent design trust. A wave of dread washed over me as I opened a spreadsheet to analyze the situation. As I meticulously reviewed the sheet and cross-referenced the dates, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The transactions seemed to align perfectly with the times she had been working late, out with her team, or at yoga. Each withdrawal was executed with a methodical precision, spread out strategically. This was no longer just betrayal, it was outright theft. And as if things couldn't get any worse, I decided to check my email later that evening. Amidst the usual junk, I stumbled upon a peculiar confirmation email from a company I had no recollection of ever engaging with, some boutique consulting agency called RVM Talent Solutions. The subject line boldly stated, "Welcome aboard. Contract approved." What caught me off guard was that the email seemed personal, not automated, and even addressed me by name in the opening line. Initially dismissing it as spam, I continued scrolling through the message. To my horror, I discovered an attached PDF contract bearing my signature, contract for freelance design advisory services and sustainable infrastructure. The document detailed dates, compensation figures, and billing information, all seemingly tied to our joint bank account. However, what truly baffled me was the contact email listed on the document. It wasn't mine. It belonged to Lena, not just her name, but her territory. Lena had created an alias for me, falsified credentials, and claimed to be utilizing our household expertise in a pitch for a sustainability project she supposedly led with her firm's private partners. As I read the contract multiple times, my eyes burned with disbelief. Towards the end, I noticed that she had used my resume and copied entire sections from my LinkedIn profile, and even included my real license number buried in the document header. It dawned on me that she had constructed a new persona for her pitch by using me as the foundation, all to impress others or to present herself as more capable than she truly was. Regardless of her intentions, she had forged my name, misrepresented my credentials, and funneled thousands of dollars from our account to support her deception. I sat there, staring at the screen, my jaw clenched so tightly that it began to ache. Despite the urge to scream, I instead decided to print every document, contract, transfer, and evidence of her deceit. The following morning, I carefully organized the documents into a tidy binder before heading to the bank. I met with the manager to review each suspicious withdrawal in detail. They initiated a fraud investigation, taking thorough notes and asking pertinent questions. Upon informing them about an account opened in my name without my knowledge, I decided to seek legal advice. An acquaintance recommended Savannah Hart, a sharp and assertive lawyer known for her successful representation in complex cases. I swiftly connected with Savannah by sharing the relevant paperwork by email, and she promptly returned my call. In a composed tone, she pointed out that I was not in a marriage, but rather a scheme. Recognizing the urgency of the situation, Savannah diligently began compiling the necessary paperwork for our upcoming divorce proceedings, including financial records, evidence of fraud, and the falsified contract. She advised me to act swiftly before Lena became aware of my plans, emphasizing that not only was she deceiving me, but she was also deceiving her current associates. If they discovered her misuse of credentials, fabrication of documents, and impersonation as a consultant, it could mean the end for her. That evening, as I revisited our wedding photograph that I had not unpacked since leaving, I felt a sense of detachment. Lena's betrayal had left me feeling drained, both emotionally and mentally. Realizing that she had manipulated me, I made the decision to take action. With Savannah's guidance, we promptly obtained a restraining order on the joint accounts and froze all assets. While Lena remained unaware, preoccupied with her new life, I sought a deeper form of retribution. I wanted her deception to have tangible consequences. After some investigation, I discovered Grayson from the yoga studio on Instagram. His post about a charity gala with my wife, Lynn, confirmed my suspicions. I messaged Lynn suggesting we discuss her husband, to which she promptly responded. The next morning, we met at a coffee shop where I shared evidence with her, including photos and emails. Lynn remained composed but hinted at her existing suspicions, especially when Lena's name was mentioned. A week later, Lynn initiated divorce proceedings. Lena later reached out, accusing me of ruining everything, but I chose not to respond. During the court proceedings 6 weeks later, Lena appeared in a gray pantsuit, evoking a sense of professionalism rather than accountability for the failed marriage. Her lawyer attempted to paint me as emotionally distant and controlling, but Savannah countered with evidence such as texts, bank statements, and a forged contract. The pivotal moment came when a text from Lena to Grayson was revealed, suggesting she would deny any wrongdoing if exposed. I felt a sudden shift in the room as that statement landed. I was given the house while she retained the car. There were no alimony payments or lingering claims, just a clear separation on paper. When Lena arrived to gather her belongings, she hesitated at the front door, wearing a look of regret that I had not seen in quite some time. "I lost you," she murmured. Meeting her gaze squarely, I responded, "No, you used me." She didn't disagree,